كان حلمك يشبه ضغاث الأحلام ويروح ما بان.
So many dots in the Arabic alphabet. Dots, dots, dots. So how can we distinguish between them? Well, one thing that I've noticed in teaching the Qaida is that the dots in the alphabet are generally overlooked. Yet, it could make life so much easier if you could just recognize the difference between them. So I'm going to teach you the difference in the dots in this lesson. So let's rearrange all the alphabet into the respective dots. The first row here has no dots. The second row has one dot each, and the third row has two dots, and the fourth three dot letters. I'm actually going to not mention the no dot letters for the moment because we will be recognizing letters in a future lesson. But for now, let's start focusing on the one dot letters. Right, let's have a look at this letter. Let's take the letter Ba. Now, what if I was to remove some part of this letter? Does that still indicate that it's a Ba? Yes, it does. Okay, let me take a little bit more off. Is it still a Ba? Well, the dot's still on the bottom, so yes, it does. What if I was to take this part off? Now I only have a dot on the bottom of that line. It's still a Ba. Now let's have a look at that. Now what can I remove from here that will still keep that letter represented? So if I was to take the top part off, we don't really know what that letter is now. So let me put that back on. Let's take the bottom half. We can still see it's still part of the Jim Ha Kha trio. So here, I think if I take off about that much, I can still see that this is a Jim. Here, if I was to again remove some part of this here, at that point, I think you could still see it's still part of the letter Kha. Now with the letter Dhal, really, there's not much I can remove from here. You need the whole lot. So even if I was to take some of this off, it would be on the line, it will still be joining, it's still a Dha. But the difference between a Dha and a Noon is that this could be a Noon if, for example, I was to, let's just say, add another letter here. Ra. So now I've joined it. That indicates that it's been joined at this end. If it's joined by another letter at this end, this would indicate it's a Noon because it's joining at this end. Whereas, if I was to put the letter Ra here and have a gap here, this indicates that this letter will not join. And that means that this letter here is not a Noon, but in fact a Dhal. So it's really now down to, when you're reading it, whether the letter here is joined or not, as to whether this will be a Dhal or a Noon. Okay, so let's take this letter here. In similar form, there is nothing that joins on to a Ra or a Za. It will then just be another letter not joining. So this is the letter Za. Now we have the letter here. What can I remove? If I was to remove this part, I'm no longer able to recognize that this is a Dad. So let's start at this end. If I was to remove this part of the alphabet, I can still see that this is a Dad because it has the loop and it has the dot. So this is Dad, and I can't remove any more. This will still be Dad even if I've taken off some of that round loop. With the letter Da and Dha, there isn't very much I can remove in order for you to recognize the letter. I suppose I could take a little bit here off. I could reduce this length a little bit, but you still need the loop, you still need a line to indicate that that is a Dha. With the Ain, if I was to remove the top part, there wouldn't really, I mean, this could still be a Noon for me. So I'd have to have that loop here. But if I was to remove the bottom half, I say that that is still a ain or a ghain. In this case, the dot is a ghain. So here, the letter ghain. Especially when we start looking at how they look when they're in the middle of a letter, how they look at the beginning and end, etc., you will start recognizing this to be an ain more than any other letter. And now we have the letter here. This one has a loop followed by the bowl shape here and the dot. If I was to remove some part of the letter here, you would see that it's still got the loop here and the dot, so this would still be the letter fa. Okay, moving on to this letter here, it's the noon. So if I was to remove this part, it would still be a noon. If I was to remove this part, it would still be a noon. So provided I have a line to indicate the top's on top, the dot is on top, this would indicate that it is a noon. So these are all the one letter dot shapes and how we can still recognize them even if we don't really know the full shape of the letter. Okay, now let's have a look at the two dot letters. So with the two dot letters, let's have a look at how we can recognize them if we were to modify them. So let's say I was to remove some part of the letter. Would I still recognize that this was the letter ta? The dots are still on top, we have a bowl. What if we were to remove some part of it here? We still have two dots on top, we have the line, so this would still be a ta. Provided we know where the line is and where the letters are above or below, even if I was to remove all of this, but I knew that the line was here somewhere and the dots are above it, this would then still be a ta. But generally, this line indicates the dots are above it and therefore this is a ta, as opposed to this letter here, which if I was to remove some aspect of it, then it's still a ya. Can remove a bit more, it's still a ya. Remove some more, it's still a ya. And again, if I was to remove the entire line, so to show you, if I was to just remove the whole lot, it's still a ya if you know that these dots are underneath the line here where all the letters are. But this here indicates that the dots are below, therefore this is the ya, where this is a ta. Because in a ta, the dots are on top, in a ya, the dots are on the bottom. And with the qa, if you remember what we were looking at with the letter fa, you need the loop to show that this is a letter qa. And in the same way, with one dot, if I hide that, one dot with a loop would be a fa, with two dots it's a qa. If I was to remove some part of it, it's still a qa. Remove some more, it's still a qa. So provided this is joining onto another letter, this and has two dots on top, this would still be the letter qa. So if you can recognize that taking some parts of each letter off, but still leaving the dots, you can still recognize the two dot letters. Okay, now let's have a look at the three dot letters. With the three dot letters, there are only two letters in the Arabic alphabet where there are three dots. That is the tha and the sheen. The distinguishing feature between the two is that here we have the flat line, here we have the W symbol. It looks like a W. So if we look at the letter tha, in the same way that we looked at the letters ba and ta and noon, if I was to remove some part of this letter here, you can see it's still a tha. If I was to remove some more, it's still a tha. even if I was to remove the entire amount, but understand that the dots are above the line rather than below, then I would know that this was the letter th. So this line here indicates that these dots are above the line, indicating that this is a th. But given that the sheen also has the dots above the line, what is the distinguishing feature between the two? Let's say I actually remove this side. Now at this point here, this is indicating 3 dots and a flat bowl. Given that the 3 dots are on the top and there is sort of a flat bowl here, this would indicate to me that this was the letter th, despite the fact that the 3 dots are to the side. I would still say that this is a th in the same way that you may write the letter I and put the dot somewhere else, but you know there's a dot, so you know it's an I. I would indicate this to be a th. So that's not a good way of removing some part of this letter. So we can't remove the W. That must be very integral in demonstrating this is a sheen. But if we were to remove this side, you can see it's still a sheen. So more, it's still a sheen. So given that the W is still there and the 3 dots are still there, this would tell me that this letter is a sheen, where this with the flat line, or even if there was no line, but it would indicate a flatness, would give me a th. Sheen, th. Right, so generally when we're reading the Qaida or the Quran, we don't really see the alphabet in various colours. Generally it's always black with the odd colour for tajweed. So I put the letters into black to show you how we can distinguish based on what I've just explained. So let's again take a look at this slide here. We're going to be looking at recognizing the Arabic alphabet just from these symbols. So let's have a look at this first row here. Here you can see these are all the different symbols that you need to try and recognize all the alphabets and their dots. We have 1 dot, we have 2 dots, 3 dots. With this little lip here, a bigger lip, a loop, a round sort of a circle, like a sideways V shape, this symbol here, and a W shape. That's all really that you need to recognize. Okay, now let's have a look and see if we can recognize what a letter would look like based on that. So the first one here, we have a dot under the line. So what letter do you think that would be? So you think about the letters that had a letter under the line, and that would be the ba. Here we have this symbol with the dot under the line. What do you think that symbol would be? Well, again, it's actually no different to these two. They're both exactly the same. They would both be ba. I just have the extra bit here to show you the start of the letter ba. This one here, even if I didn't have anything there, the fact that it's at the bottom, it's a ba. On this letter here, the dot's on the top. So opposite to the ba, this one would represent a letter being noon. Here we have 3 dots on top. If you remember, we only had 2 that had 3 dots. One was sheen and one was tha. Well, we recognize that the sheen had the W symbol. So since this doesn't have that, this would be a tha. Now here we've had that side part of a letter included with the dot on top. Again, it would still be a noon, like this one here. Regardless of whether you have this bit or not, it would still be a noon. Repeated here, this one's a dot on the bottom of the line, just exactly like this. It's a ba. Now here, this is the symbol from the jim, ha, kha trio, with just the top part showing, indicating that this would be, with no dots, a ha. Here we have 2 dots at the bottom. Now if you have 2 dots at the bottom, that would represent a ya. Here, again, It's a repeat of this symbol here, except that I have cut off the line here to indicate that this one is probably going to be a the, because it's one of the letters which does not join on this side. So I've cut it off to show you that this would be a the, as in dal, val, ra, za. All of those will be joined at this end, but will be not joined at this end. So I've got a cut-off indicator here to show you that this is a the, where here it's a continuation as if the letter is going to continue. So this one would be the noon. Cut off here indicates this would be a the. This letter here, you have the loop, but with one dot. So this would be a va. Here we have a loop, but with a little bit of a stick indicating the dod sign. Here we have the sod sign with no dot, and a dod with one dot. This one here, similar to this symbol here, which we said was the jim ha kha trio. This has no dots, whereas this one has one dot under the line, indicating that this would be the jim. Here we have the ra or the za sign, which has a dot. There's no continuation at this end, indicating this would be the za symbol. Now here with the three dots, put them next to each other, the one with the three dots with no W underneath would be the tha, whereas here there is the W underneath the three dots, indicating that this would be the sheen. So sheen here, tha here. Again, this one dot on top. Well, it's a continuation, there's a dot on top, so that would make it a noon. Here, the ta, you have a symbol of the ta. You have to have the loop and the line. You have the loop and the line with the dot, the. This one is a ta, this one is a the. There's no other way of representing these two letters. We've had this before, two dots on the bottom. What would two dots on the bottom represent? It's a ya. Now look, two dots on the top. They're both exactly the same, but one's at the bottom of the line, one's on the top of the line. This one indicates a letter where there are two dots in above. That would be the ta. Here, ya, here, ta. So you can see that if it's underneath, it's one letter. If it's above, it's another letter. Here the dots on the bottom. So we had a dot on top. We said that was a noon. The dot on the bottom is a ba. You can just imagine the sort of bowl shape that would be here with the dot underneath. That's the ba. But even without the bowl shape here, we can still see that if the dot's on the bottom, this is a ba. Here we have our loop again, but with two dots. Over here we had the loop, but with one dot. We said that was a fa. Here we have the loop, but with two dots. So this is the qaf. Qaf. Now here we have this symbol here, which looks like a hamza, but in actual fact it's an ayn. A hamza generally would have some kind of a bowl or some other symbol to indicate the hamza, like a hat. Here it's the ayn, so ayn here, but this one has the dot indicating it's the ghain. So ayn with no dot, or ghain with one dot. And again, that trio that we looked at, the ha, the jim, and the dot on the top would be the kha. So let me go through them one more time. Dot on the bottom, ba. Another dot on the bottom with this symbol, but this is just a little part of the bowl, ba. Dot on top, noon. Three dots on top without the W, tha. The dot on top, even with some part of the letter showing, noon. Just like this one, noon, noon. Dot on the bottom, ba. Dot on the bottom, ba. Dot on the bottom, ba. Here we have the top part of the letter Jim Ha Kha. There's no dot here. This is Ha. Here we have two dots on the bottom, indicating a Ya. It's the only letter where the two dots will be at the bottom. Here again we have one dot on top, like here and here, except that in this letter there's no continuation. It would not be joining with the letter that follows it. So this would be the, where this one would be a noon, because it would join the following letter. Here we have a loop with a dot, fa. Here we have a oval shaped loop with a dot, dad. Here we have the Jim Ha Kha, but this time with the dot underneath. So this one would be the Jim. Here, similar to the Dal, we have the Za. Because it's not going to be joined at this end with the next letter, it will be on its own, Za. Here we have three dots with a W, Sheen. Three dots with no W, Tha. Again, no other symbol, just the dot, but it's above the line, so this would be Noon. Here we have the dal shape with the dot, Za. Two dots on the bottom, Ya. Two dots on top, Ta. One dot on the bottom, Ba. A loop shape but with two dots, Qaf. Here we have what would be the Ain but with the dot on top, making it Ghain. And again the Jim Ha Kha, but this one you have with the dot on top, it's Kha. So I hope you see some light at the end of the tunnel with the letters and all their dots. I hope I have made it slightly clearer for you, at least to recognize what we are looking at as we proceed forward into looking at the letters when they are not in their original shape. Assalamu alaikum.
ما كان حلمك يشبه ضباط الأحلام